seems like the, oh. Okay, great. Minu is also here. Minu, welcome. Minu is the founding director of our research initiative.
Hi, Nicola. Hi, everybody. Welcome, Nicola. Good to meet you. Good to see you like this.
Yes. Yes, let's start. It is my honor to introduce Dr. Pless today. I am Chen Wei, Associate Professor of Management from San Francisco State University, and I'm the Associate Director of RIE Research Initiative, and who also, kind of constantly spam email your employees with our events and conference informations. And today it is my honor to introduce Dr. Pless, who is from University of South Australia, to be with us for her talk on responsible leadership. And this talk will be recorded, and we will also upload it to our YouTube channel later. If you, oh, wait, sorry about that. I think I have a technical glitch here, kind of stop my screen here. Oh, okay. So Dr. Nicola Pless is a chaired professor of management at the University of South Australia. And she's also a professor at the University of Queensland and served as a guardian of the Globally Responsible Leadership Initiative. The Globally Responsible Leadership Initiative exists to kickstart the development of globally responsible leadership and practice in organizations and societies worldwide. It is the leading incubator for innovation and new practice in business schools and for collaboration with business in the space of ethics, responsibility, and sustainability. Actually, I'm quite fascinated, about this initiative. If Dr. Pless can introduce us a little bit more about this, it would be great. And she's also an executive coach certified by the Institute for Executive Coaching and Leadership. Dr. Pless is a former Vice President, International Leadership Development, and worked for Union Bank of Switzerland in Basel and New York, and also the World Bank Group in Washington, D.C. And she also served on the faculties of ESADE, INSEAD, University of St. Gallen, and as honorary Van Gowen SJ Chair at the University of Antwerp. Hopefully, I pronounce everything in the correct way. And she has lived in 7 countries on 3 continents and combines her multicultural background with multi-sector business experiences, which she translates into her academic work. In her coaching practice, she also focuses on leadership coaching and applies positive psychology and conducts narrative coaching and developmental coaching towards responsible and inclusive leadership and revolving ethical dilemmas. Her research is focused on diversity, equity, inclusion, leadership, neuroscience, and ethics. And she is also a pioneer in responsible leadership. Her most recent book on responsible leadership was launched at the World Economic Forum and reviewed by Harvard Business School. Actually, I was searching for a responsible leadership related book, and that's how I found you and reached out to you, invited Dr. Pless to talk to us, and I really enjoyed reading her book. And she also sits on the editorial boards of the Journal Business Ethics and Academy of Management Collection. She won the AOM Best Reviewer Award. Congrats. Her research appeared in leading academic journals, including Journal Business Ethics, Human Resource Management, Journal Management Studies, and Organization Research Methods, among others. And she received numerous awards and has been featured in the media, such as BBC, Boston Global, Business Week, CEO Magazine, Fortune. And her teaching was honored with the Aspen Institute's Faculty Pioneer Award. Let's give Dr. Pless a very, very warm welcome for her talk today. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the chat or unmute yourself and ask after the presentations. I will be sure monitoring, all the questions in the chat, and I will let her take it from here. Thank you so much for being here with us, Dr. Pless.
Thank you so much, Shengwai, for the kind and nice and warm introduction. And also, Mino, thank you so much for the invitation. It's really wonderful to be here and to give this intercontinental talk via Zoom, which is really nice, on responsible leadership and purpose. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share one of the frameworks that I've developed with my research team on 4 orientations on responsible leadership. And I tried to show today how they determine the philosophy of leadership, the strategy of the firm, and approaches to value creation. So let me start with one of these inspirational quotes by Simon Sinek, who says, "The responsibility of leadership is to give people a cause to belong to, and then give them the permission to find ways to advance that cause." So there is definitely this purpose side in responsible leadership, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit in more detail during the course of my presentation. Now, responsible leadership has emerged as a topic since 2005. So it has become of great practical relevance. So it started basically also with a call for engagement by the European Foundation of Management Development, together with a globally responsible leadership initiative. And you see this picture here to the left. That was the initial call from the practical side. And so my research team and I then continued with the release of the book, Shengmai, that you just mentioned, on responsible leadership, published by Routledge. And we just released the 2nd edition in 2022. And then it became step by step a topic that really entered corporate boardrooms, to the extent that at 2017, the World Economic Forum dedicated a whole summit to the topic of responsive and responsible leadership. So what you see here to the right, and that is actually Klaus Schwab here, the founder of the World Economic Forum. Responsible leadership has also become one of the most widely discussed topics in the broader public debate on leadership. It dominates the discourse on the World Wide Web. So as you can see here from this slide, Google search that I did in March 2022, there it had 2.7 billion hits. And then ethical leadership was second with 1 billion fewer hits. And as you can see, the other leadership styles, while also being quite relevant, get less attention currently in the broader public discourse. And that is due to the particular nature of the topic, of its multi-level impact that it has, and I will come to that. So this demonstrates how the discourse on responsible leadership has emerged and how it has impacted the broader debate. And as Professor Ansui, a prolific researcher, recently said, the world has changed, giving urgency and legitimacy to the idea of responsible leadership. Now, you may ask, what is responsible leadership? Well, I will provide a brief overview of the concept so that we have a common base and common understanding. So the concept links leadership research and the discussion on corporate social responsibility. It is also a moral leadership construct that is rooted in business ethics, thereby acknowledging the different philosophical traditions that underline and influence the understandings of leadership and of responsibility. It also acknowledges that leaders are accountable for their actions. So it has this consequential perspective and consequential view. It is also largely grounded in stakeholder theory and therefore influenced by Edward Freeman and his work on stakeholder management. However, we are here on a different level. So while stakeholder management is discussing relations at the organizational level, responsible leadership is an individual level concept. And in contrast to other moral leadership constructs, here followers are understood as stakeholders. So they are not simply understood as subordinates within an organization, but as constituents inside and outside the organization with whom leaders need to build relationships and whom leaders need to mobilize in order to achieve objectives together and make a positive impact in business and society. So leaders in this broad stakeholder environment have quite a daunting task because they have basically to integrate stakeholders from different backgrounds with different interests, with different values, and they need to be able to make decisions that consider the interests and needs of these different constituents. And this can be quite difficult because often there are conflicts that arise among the stakeholders or with stakeholders that leaders need to mitigate, and they need to balance these different interests. So quite an extended scope of responsibilities that comes with it. Furthermore, responsible leadership is a multi-level construct or phenomenon. So at the individual level, we talk about, let me just share that. So multi-level construct touching the micro level, so leading self, the meso level, leading teams, and the more macro level, leading organizations, leading stakeholders to together achieve objective and leading in a global business environment. And so the question is often, if one talks about responsible leadership, to look into the intention. So what kind of purpose do leaders pursue in order to mobilize these different constituents? And in order to mobilize them to achieve, for instance, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, or to work together with stakeholders to create social innovations or responsible innovations. So briefly, we understand responsible leadership from an academic perspective as an intentional and purpose-driven approach, and also understand it as a relational influence process between leaders and stakeholders geared towards the establishment of accountability pertaining to matters of organizational value creation. So this is the working definition, and purpose and intention play an important role in responsible leadership, particularly in how business executives drive the business and what kind of value they create and for whom. So an important question here. And in the end, this also has an effect on the kind of solutions that are developed in light of grand societal challenges. So our approach is that we propose and suggest that the intentional basis of leadership has an impact on organizational level and societal outcomes. So, and if we look into purpose, let me just share a definition here. So it can be defined as an aspirational reason for being, which inspires and provides a call for action for an organization and its partners, as well as their stakeholders, and provides benefit to local and the global society. So in this sense, there is a strong connection between purpose and responsible leadership, and in essence, it is a part of our construct. Now, in the following, I will draw on an article that we published in Academy of Management Perspectives that has become quite relevant recently. And I will describe this landscape of responsible leadership by actually outlining the different responsible leadership orientations that we have identified. So our research shows that there is not only one responsible leadership approach, but that leaders have different understandings about what leadership is and responsible leadership means. So, and I will also, by doing that, show how this field has evolved over time in business practice. So this landscape that we have developed is based actually on qualitative research. So we use an unobtrusive approach by conducting content analysis of speeches, of presentations, of blogs, and where the opinion of CEOs was shared. This was a group of international leaders representing Asia, the US, and Europe, and also owners of firms as well as CEOs of publicly listed firms. And this landscape, so what has emerged through the content analysis are two dimensions. So this is on the x-axis, what you see, the breadth of constituent groups. So how many stakeholders do leaders actually acknowledge in what they are doing. And then on the y-axis, you see the degree of accountability towards others. So to what extent do they feel responsible for stakeholders and the consequences of their actions on them? And within this space that these two axes create, we were able to actually locate for different responsible leadership prototypes. So the idealist, the traditional economist, the opportunity seeker, and the integrator. Now, I will go through that because it shows a bit of the discussion that we have, and it also provides a bit of an understanding why there are different approaches towards this construct. So I will start by going through these different prototypes and provide some ideas how individual level leadership is related to CSR strategies, to the purpose of the firm, and also to value creation. So the first type that I'm going to talk about is the idealist. So the idealist, as you can see here from this framework, has a narrow focus on stakeholders. And these are particularly stakeholders in need as represented by this photo here. And they have a high degree of accountability towards others. So this is an interesting prototype. This is not exactly the norm. So it is a particular type of responsible leader who cares about the needs of marginalized stakeholders, those in need, and those who are usually excluded from the broader discourse in business. So responsible leaders with an idealistic orientation have a very narrow focus, as I said, and high degree of responsibility. Now, I have studied a number of business leaders on different continents, and I found that it was mostly social entrepreneurs who represent this idealistic type of a responsible leader. And if you look into social entrepreneurs, their purpose is to create values for stakeholders in need, for society at large, and to generate solutions for them. And so the idealistic leader, idealistic responsible leader, is driven by humanitarianism. They are motivated by altruism. They care for stakeholders in need. They actually, their motivation, often they achieve a psychological fulfillment through their engagement and through their value creation for this particular stakeholder group. And we found that their leadership style is often a servant one. So a style that is caring, compassionate, service-oriented towards followers. And I do have an example here to share. So one is, and quite fascinating, social entrepreneur is Dr. Joe Madiat from Gram Vikas. So that is a social enterprise honored by awards from the Schwab Foundation, so which is an arm of the World Economic Forum, by Ashoka and others. And their purpose is to promote processes which are sustainable, socially inclusive, gender equitable, and to enable critical masses and marginalized rural people or communities to achieve a dignified quality of life. So it's interesting, they use business as a means to help people in need. So this organization provides actually consulting services to underprivileged villages, helps them to get access to clean drinking water, thereby helping people to be healthy, have more dignity in life, and particularly support women. Because in many parts of the world, women are the water holders of their nations, go to remote areas, try to bring back clean drinking water. Often not possible because sources are often polluted. This is a cause of disease, so child mortality is related to that, but also mortality of women. And so by bringing access to clean drinking water and helping villages to construct their own water and sanitation systems, this organization helps to get people out of poverty, enabling them to have a better life. So, for instance, it frees up time for women to set up their own little enterprises. It helps girls to go to school because they no longer need to actually engage in getting water for their communities. So this is really a true entrepreneurial spirit, a very altruistic approach, but with quite substantial impact. So they achieved or touched and helped more than 100,000 households and are also now internationally active. So to sum up, these idealistic responsible leaders understand that for them, business success means long-term value creation for stakeholders in society, particularly those in leads. And also they aim at obviously sustaining their own organizational viability. But they have pretty different business models than the other leaders in the other quadrants. Now, having talked about the idealist, let me come to the second prototype, which is the traditional economist. So while they are both very different from each other, what they have in common is a narrow focus on stakeholders. So while the idealist looks at stakeholders in need, the traditional economist is focused on shareholders. And in contrast to the idealists, they are very much driven by self-interest, so have a rather low degree of accountability towards others. Let's take a look into that. But before that, again, the idealists, they engage in social issues because it's the reason for their being. Traditional economists and opportunity seeker have a quite different approach towards that. An example of a leader that pursues this rather economic approach is can be seen here. So it's T.J. Rogers. So he is the founder and CEO of Cypress Semiconductors. They may also sit in the San Francisco region. So He is actually quite engaged in trying to find solutions for businesses, but also engage in CSR to a certain extent. He is very much understanding himself as applying the approach of Milton Friedman. And if you're familiar with his approach, then you know it's the business of business is business. The social responsibility of business is to improve profits. And it is suggested that business leaders do not engage in CSR. However, there are ways to do it in a different way, which he does. So he supports his employees, for instance, to get engaged in the Harvest Food Bank competition, to engage some of their time there. And they were quite successful in doing that over the years, won this award. And he experienced that this has a positive effect also for business. So while not needing to invest, it still helps the organization to build employee morale, to attract new employees, and it's also good for PR. And also, to a certain extent, it helps one of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and that is zero hunger, to contribute to that. But in contrast, let me just come back to this example. Here you see through the engagement of Graham Vickers, they actually deliver on 11 of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So there is quite a bit of difference, and this is going back to the purpose of the firm and to the particular approach. So in a nutshell, when we talk about the traditional economist, and I understand them also as a responsible leadership orientation, yet rather an minimalistic one, but still, I mean, they focus on creating jobs, paying taxes, and doing business in line with the law, the customs of a particular country. However, they are quite self-interest driven in their approach. They are driven by profit maximization, mainly feel accountable towards stakeholders, and their leadership style as such is rather rule-based and past goal-oriented in the sense of putting business goals first. And as I said, the social that CSR approach is very much influenced by Milton Friedman. So it's rather reactive, a reactive CSR strategy, reduced to paying taxes, creating jobs, and complying with laws and customs in society. Yet we see some examples that are quite sustainable. We also see that some of these economic leaders make quite substantial decisions by, for instance, saying we stay within the country in which we are headquartered, have our production there in order to be able to create jobs. Now, having said that, there is also a certain downside connected to this approach. As you can see here, from this slide, over the past decade, we have seen quite a number of substantial either accidents or corporate wrongdoing or individual wrongdoing that is very much related with the risks that are associated with this approach. So the risk is, in fact, an extensive self-interest driven behavior, on extensive pursuit of greed that can actually turn good leaders into what Sumantran Ghoshal has called an excessive self-interest and driven leader, ruthless, hard-driving, strictly top-down, command and control focused, shareholder value obsessed, win at any cost business leader. So this is a bit of the downside that an economic responsible approach can turn through too much drive from greed into drive a business leader outside of the responsible leadership landscape. And these experiences over time had led to a shift in mindset and a redefinition of purpose beyond profit maximization. So in essence, we see an evolutionary shift from shareholder focus, to a stakeholder perspective. And we see that more and more business leaders try to pursue broader stakeholder approach, take accountability for achieving sustainable development goals, set up, for instance, the Global Business Coalition Against HIV/AIDS, tuberculosis, malaria, founded the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, engage in the Business Roundtable Institute for Corporate Ethics. And so we see this evolutionary shift from a shareholder focus to a stakeholder perspective, even in those institutions like the US Business Roundtable that was spearheading the Milton Friedman approach until 2019, where they came out with a new statement, a new mission statement, committed to applying a stakeholder perspective. And the statement was signed by 181 US CEOs who committed to leading their companies for the benefit of all stakeholders. Now, let us take a closer look into this shift. First, why it has happened, and then what this means. So it is a shift actually from this traditional economist prototype into this opportunity seeker quadrant. And this is really quite a substantial evolution that we are seeing here. So this is due to the fact that business leaders are actually pushed by stakeholders to engage more in doing good and reducing their negative impact. And it is also due to rising expectations in the broader public. So coming from different stakeholders. So firstly, I mean, promoting human rights, providing a fair and healthy and safe work environment is expected by employees, and not only in developed countries, but also in developing countries. We also see that through these accidents, there is a much environmental accidents, a much higher sensitivity in the broader public. And it is expected that business leaders take a forward-looking perspective, take care of the impact that their production processes have, and also build fair relationships within the supply chain. We also see that particular those organizations that are doing business internationally engage in activities that contribute to alleviating poverty. We also see that that future generations are now voicing their concerns about what is going on. Think about the new generation of Gen Z. So business leaders are called to act as corporate citizens and take a more active role vis-a-vis pressing societal challenges and to achieve United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And this is reflected basically in the responses of, let me just come here, in the responses of the instrumentalist, the opportunity seeker. So this group of leaders has a broader stakeholder perspective, considers the needs of key business stakeholders. Also because, I mean, they often have a strategic perspective. They scan the environment for risk and opportunities. And since these expectations are there, they know they have to respond. But at the same time, they share with the traditional economists a rather low accountability as such for a broader range of stakeholders. Now, so as said, they share a similar basis with the economists, so rather self-interest and profit-driven, but they have a different motivation. So their motivation is not purely to increase short-term shareholder value, but their motivation is strategic in nature, to achieve a competitive advantage, to build a positive reputation of the organization. So in doing that, they know they have to consider the interests of needs of a broader range of stakeholders, and they particularly look into what Freeman calls the primary stakeholders. So those that are close to the business, like the customers, the suppliers, the shareholders, maybe auditors, right? And their particular approach in terms of leadership style is more rule-based, more transactional. And they have, in terms of strategy, a responsive approach. So creating shared value is one of the keywords that you may know. So this approach is very much driven by the work of Michael Porter and his colleague Kramer from Harvard Business School. And so they introduced the concept of creating shared value. And in this approach, the purpose is still understood to be profit maximization. It is still predominantly about economic value, but it also considers stakeholders. So it is an approach that I would call profit plus. So it means it also integrates creating benefit and value for society and reducing the environmental footprint. And these leaders are particularly inclined to do that if there is a tangible benefit for business coming with it. So as said, the main motivation is competitive advantage, and also to enhance public relations and firm reputation. And there is where we see a certain risk. And that is if leaders are mainly driven, for instance, by increasing their corporate reputation, this can lead to the perception that they are doing greenwashing. So if it's not really backed with substantial engagement in sustainability, in corporate social responsibility, this may raise some question marks among stakeholders. So now also the focus on business outcomes as such is still very much rooted in the tradition of economic thinking. However, due to stakeholder pressure, instrumental business leaders are more responsive towards CSR. They comply with laws and regulation, but they also pursue societal issues that are beneficial for business, particularly if they can realize a quick win, right? And so what Kramer and Porter suggest for this particular approach is to basically identify social issues and engage in them that are close to the strategy, so that one can really have a concerted strategic effort here. A very good example of a CEO that actually drove sustainability initiatives from this rather instrumental responsible leadership perspective is Jeff Immelt. So former CEO of General Electric. You may remember he was the one who drove this eco-imagination initiative at General Electric's. They had, for instance, zero-emission hybrid buses. They invested in clean energy. They were active in reducing greenhouse gas emissions early on from 2005. And at the same time, we're very much focused to also increase growth and make money with that. And this is all fine. It simply shows us here what is actually the approach of the instrumental leader. And I have this quote here, which very much brings that to light. And he said, we are investing in environmentally cleaner technology because we believe it will increase our revenue, our value, and our profits. Not because it's trendy or moral, but it will accelerate our growth and make us more competitive. So very much really a blueprint for this approach. And they, through this approach, basically also touched here and delivered on 4 of the UN development goals that are listed here at the bottom. Now, the strength of this instrumental approach is then when large multinational companies adopt it, and we have other examples like Nestlé or Walmart, they have a chance to actually generate a broad and positive impact and to really scale that. And this is, if it goes into the right direction, one can really have good and substantial positive effects. However, there are also some weaknesses aligned to this particular approach. And one is that those solutions that come out of this approach, since they are so closely linked to the strategy of the firm, often remain and are driven by this business case logic and not driven by systemic thinking, which is often necessary in order to develop really profound solutions, for instance, towards the environmental problem. So just to give you an example, we see currently this development with the electric cars, which is fantastic because it helps to reduce the CO2 emission quite short term now. However, we have these longer term effects, all these questions, what to do with the batteries once we do not need them. So there is a waste problem. And then there is another problem because obviously cars need to be charged with, there is electricity needed. So the question then is, where does the electricity come from? Does it come from clean energy? Does it come from nuclear? Does it come from coal? And particularly coal is obviously very, very closely linked to CO2 emission and to global warming. So these are also then the additional systemic questions that need to be asked. So not always are, unfortunately, electric cars the solutions and not in all contexts. And this brings me basically this responsible leadership mindset. If I summarize that, so this means here societal engagement becomes a driver for competitive advantage, for growth and business success. So we have here, you see already 3 different mindsets. And now I come to the final one. So to the integrator, the most recent one that has been developed. So what we see here, the integrator has the same broad breadth of stakeholder focus like the opportunity seeker. Yet they have, like the idealist, a high degree of accountability. And they also have a particular sense for the economic bottom line, which is necessary when driving and leading for business companies. So here, what we see is truly a paradigm shift. So while we had from the traditional economist to the opportunity seeker, that was an evolution. But from the opportunity seeker to the integrator, we see that a paradigmatic shift is taking place. So this is a normative shift from a profit-driven approach to a social purpose-driven approach. So Again, the integrator has the humanitarian drive from the idealist. They have a sense for the economic bottom line from the traditional economist, and strategic thinking from the opportunity seeker. And they try to bring it all together. So they have a broad stakeholder focus, high accountability towards all legitimate stakeholders. And this is quite challenging. And it's also a new narrative that has emerged. And this is aligned with the discussion around conscious capitalism, right? So at the broader level, a discussion that is linked to responsible leadership, and also to the discussion around the development of new for-benefit corporations and hybrid organizations. Also a very recent development and discussion. So integrative business leaders are driven by a pro-social motivation, by humanistic values, and try to translate them into a substantial business purpose. So they do not see profit making as a purpose for business, as do the traditional economist and the opportunity seeker. So unlike these two prototypes, they see profit making rather as an outcome. So you see this kind of shift that is taking place there. So, and this is an example for this new understanding of business purpose. So it was Paul Pullman, the former CEO of Unilever, who stated, "I don't think our fiduciary duty is to put shareholders first. I say the opposite. What we firmly believe is that if we focus our company on improving the lives of the world's citizens and come up with genuine, sustainable solutions, we are more in sync with consumers and society. And ultimately, this will result in good shareholder returns." So it's a little bit like switching the equation here, right? So it's not the focus on profit first. Here it is the focus on stakeholders first, and then the realization that shareholder return will come from undertaking this kind of considerate business approach. So it was quite interesting because at the very start of Paul Pullman's tenure, what he did was to abolish short-term reporting. So they took some steps to create a new reality. So in general, the mission of integrative business leaders is dedicated to a higher purpose. They are motivated to create value for shareholders inside and outside the organization, and to create change for the better. So that is their main driver. And when making decisions, they try to balance the economic, the social, and environmental considerations. So here, in summary, so they feel accountable towards all legitimate stakeholders. And in terms of responsible leadership style, they have a relational approach, pursue shared and transformational leadership, are compassionate, and try to really drive an inclusive style, and have a collaborative approach towards stakeholders, meaning in contrast to the instrumentalists who rather use stakeholders to achieve their objectives, we see here that stakeholders and the relationship towards them become an end in themselves. So there is an emphasis on creating valuable and trustworthy relationships with different stakeholders. This is seen as being important for achieving positive societal outcomes, and to do that together. So this is also quite a part of the narrative. So together pursuing economic viability, social value creation, together finding ways to reduce the environmental footprint, and at the same time develop social innovations to change the world for the better. So in essence, the integrative leader pursues a proactive CSR approach, right? So it's a proactive strategy, and they partner with stakeholders to create societal innovation. And this then goes along with certain behaviors that we have specified in the roles model of responsible leadership. So here you see particular behaviors, particular styles that can be observed in leaders. And this roles model is composed of 9 different roles that you see here. So the inner part, these are the more normative roles. So the leader as visionary, servant, steward, and citizen. Then the more operational roles, the architect, the change agent, the coach, and the storyteller. And you see then here the weaver as well. So that is the boundary spanner. So actually, the core roles are the one in the center. So for instance, responsible leader pursues a servant style, so serving the desires and needs of different stakeholders. They are also visionaries for positive change. They are stewards of the environment and of society. And they are citizens who try to create value for their different groups of stakeholders and to tackle grand societal challenges. So these are some of the roles that we have identified in responsible leaders that are particularly pertaining to an integrative style. And the goal of these integrative leaders is to fulfill a higher purpose through business. So reconciling profit and purpose. And examples are various. So one finds them on all continents. So in the US, I think about John Mackay from the Whole Foods Market. Think about Yvonne Chouinard, former CEO of Patagonia. Think about Ray Anderson, a former founder and former CEO of of Interface. So quite a number of examples. And leaders that adopt this approach are usually guided by ethics, including moral values. And their priority is doing the right thing. So they are not primarily guided or driven by reputation or competitive advantage. They try to embed their actions in an integrative approach to actually achieve positive outcomes. And they combine often quite paradoxical opposites. So they try to combine commercial logic with the social welfare logic, or the business case with ethical reflection, or competitive approach with cooperation and care for stakeholders. So it is this interconnected thinking that is one of the major characteristics here. So really trying to bring that together. So here we have some statements from some of them. So take the example here, the quote by Ray Anderson. He said, "For those who think business only exists to make a profit, I suggest to think again. Business makes a profit to exist. Surely it must exist for another higher purpose." So it's quite interesting if one does these speech analysis to see actually the way of thinking. Here I like to share an example with you. I'm not sure if you know Anita Roddick still. She was the founder of The Body Shop. So this international cosmetics brand that was founded in the UK and started with one shop in Brighton, then became a large international franchise system, was acquired by L'Oreal. L'Oreal more streamlined the organization, and now it was again sold to La Natura, so Brazilian organization that is, as the name says, La Natura focused more on the environmental and social side. So probably a home for this organization that is a quite good fit. Now, Anita Roddick very early on, already in the 80s, decided she wanted to do something different from the traditional cosmetics industry. So for her, it was important to think about broader issues like social and environmental ones. So she was basically setting up her business first to avoid animal testing. And they used recycling very early on and built actually never heard of positive relationships towards different stakeholders. So they were the first in the UK to set up a childcare facility for employees. They had great client relationships. So in the shops, ran campaigns like, for instance, for building up self-esteem. They also were at the forefront of fair trade by building responsible relationship towards indigenous communities from which they sourced some of their ingredients and paid them a fair price so that they, the communities were less dependent on the free market economy and helped them to become self-sustainable through these relationships. Her style was servant and inclusive as well. And so there's a lot of learning from that particular case that we saw in the past. Also, CEOs like Paul Pullman were referring to her in some of their speeches, which is interesting but understandable when one thinks about having a positive environmental impact, learning from her in terms of building sustainable relationships towards different stakeholders. Was also quite interesting when they went public at the London Stock Exchange. She and her husband took that as an opportunity to actually refine their purpose, to actually contribute to the betterment of the planet. So quite interesting to look into these examples that are out there. So in a nutshell, the approach of responsible leadership includes building sustainable relationships with different stakeholders, and integrative leaders try to contribute through business to stakeholder value creation and positive social change. They also often engage in cross-sector collaborations, which they understand as part of their business approach. They are inclusive, often having a whole person approach, are collaborative and engage in co-creation processes. Now, what we see, and this is quite interesting, is that here business is seen as a driver for value creation. And one may look into other examples as well here and can link it perhaps to developments also like the benefit corporation, B Corps that are now pursued by an approach that more and more organizations pursue in order to get an accreditation for their approach. We see now that there are large multinational companies that are B Corp and can be identified as integrators, like, for instance, Danone, so the yogurt manufacturer that had under the leadership of their former CEO, basically transformed their mission and their whole product assortment by selling unhealthy food like biscuits or their beer line their beer products. So in order to make it a health-oriented organization. So the strength of the integrative responsible leadership approach is that they focus on generating these sustainable solutions and try to generate substantive problems to societal problems. So they are not looking into providing a remedy, but a true source of solution. And they can be quite influential if they achieve, as large-scale organizations, to have an impact through scaling, and thereby then considerably contribute to UN Sustainable Development Goals. However, we also see a particular weakness that comes with this new approach, and that is that leaders who are trendsetters, and that's what we often see, integrators have a higher risk of failure. They also have to balance competing bottom lines, and this can be difficult. And they often require more time and resources to develop systemic and sustainable solutions. Yet, this is a new and promising approach to leadership at the strategic organizational level that has emerged over the past 10 years, and that I think can generate or has the potential to generate profound innovations for tackling societal challenges and hopefully contributing to saving our planet. Now, let me summarize this landscape here. So idealists engage in social issues because it's the reason for their being. Traditional economists engage in social issues because it is legally required and perhaps immediately relevant for the economic bottom line. Then opportunity seekers began to use societal engagement to generate a competitive advantage. But this also sparked a shift from a shareholder focus to a broader stakeholder perspective. And then there has been a groundbreaking revolution that is happening right now towards the integrative approach, which is a normative shift where business is seen as a driver of social value creation and positive change. So in conclusion, there are different responsible leadership mindsets. They exist side by side in different industries, in different countries, and in different contexts. And these mindsets have implication at the individual, organization, and societal level. There's a lot of research that needs to be done. What do these different mindsets mean for decision making? What does it mean for leadership development? What does it mean for the quality of stakeholder relationships? What does it mean for social innovation? What does it mean for other business innovations? Right. So I think it's a very, very interesting time that we are in. It is probably historic. And as such, I mean, it is a great place right now to do research and also research in collaboration with business. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much for your wonderful presentation, Dr. Pless. So if you have any questions, unmute yourself and please ask. I have seen some questions in the chat already. I myself have a quick question here to Dr. Pless. Is like when I heard you talking about the integrators type of responsible leaders in today's world, how would you describe the most significant challenges this type of leaders might encounter, like in today's business environment, particularly when the profit objectives are in conflicting with the ethical purposes? It's always hard, like leaders are being pulled by different directions. They need to kind of like have like empathies towards all those different concerns from different directions. I would love to hear what you think.
Yeah, there are quite a number of challenges. I mean, up until recently, leaders have not really been educated in coping with different stakeholders, with different interests, to balance different important aspects in decision making, business consideration, ethical ones, other interests. And so it is one of the key challenges. Therefore, it's important for business leaders to have actually to be aware of their true north, that they have a moral compass that can guide them when making decisions, particularly in those gray areas of ethics. So where they need for themselves know what are their values, what are their principles that guide their decisions. Another challenge is obviously, I mean, integrators need to balance these different objectives that are there. And it is difficult to really respond to all the stakeholders. Now, we saw that recently in the Denon case, where the CEO had to step down because shareholder pressures became so strong. So he was criticized that while pursuing a strong social and environmental agenda, the return for investment was not high enough. And so that was unfortunate, and it shows one of the challenges that those leaders at the helm of the organization are confronted with. And since this is such a new environment, they have mostly to develop these approaches for themselves. So there is not the blueprint that they can follow. There is not the real one way to go. And so it is important to really be aware of that there are these conflicting stakeholder interests are a reality. And so it is important to have advisors to can actually also assess the situation and provide these different perspectives in a condensed way for a CEO that he or she can make a really informed decision and can set the direction for the organization.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Oh, Li Hua.
Thank you so much. I think that the framework you presented, it was very neat. I have never thought from that perspective. I myself did corporate social responsibility research for quite a number of years. So I really like that framework. I have a few questions which might be related to that framework. One is, have you seen any quantitative studies that try to, or you yourself did it, try to categorize a sample of firms into those 4 categories and look at the outcome or antecedents of this? And the first thing that coming into my mind was like, if you have a social enterprises sample, that would be all on the top. And if you have Fortune 500 companies, then it will be like on the bottom, mostly, a lot of them. So I just would like you to just elaborate a little bit of what insights you have on that one. Can I say another one? Maybe I'll ask later. So yeah, just this one first.
Yes, so basically, you touch on an interesting point. Thank you for this question. This framework can be used as at the individual level. So like here, responsible business leader landscapes. I also use it at the organizational level. So in fact, yes, I analyze organizations according to a questionnaire that I have developed in line with this approach. And one can systematically make a link to certain innovation approaches that are there. It is more qualitative research in that sense. Quantitative in the sense of developing a scale. Yes, it is also happening, but that is more at the individual level. So, but this is interesting because I approach responsible leadership as a multi-level phenomenon. So the responsible leadership behavior and the impact that it has at the organizational level. Now, to date, what I did was I collapsed the traditional and opportunity seeker into one dimension because they share the same paradigm, and operationalize that. And then the idealist and the integrator into an opposing one, or they are both independent in that sense because they have different paradigms. And to relate that to CSR outcomes in a quantitative way. And I can show that the integrative, idealistic driven approach has a stronger effect on CSR outcomes than the traditional list and the instrumentalist combined. So It is positive to see that also at the lower level here, so the opportunity seeker or instrumentalist dimension, that they achieve quite substantial outcomes, but the integrative approach can achieve a more or a higher level of outcome, so more significant higher level outcome.
That's very interesting. Do you have the paper draft, or it's in progress, or it's published?
It's in review.
Oh, it's under review. I would
Yes.
love to read that paper. 'Cause I think I think more like at an organizational level, because I'm the strategy and organization theory type. So have you seen, again, have you seen like at organizational level, this kind of a largest sample quantitative study?
Not basically related to this particular framework.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, if you send me an email, I can perhaps share with you some articles regarding outcomes
Okay. Thank you very much.
related to the framework.
Sounds good. I will let others ask questions. If we have extra time, I can ask a few other questions.
That's great. JP, you mentioned, yeah.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Hi, Professor Pless. Thank you so much for that presentation. And I really appreciate the clarity of your framework and the argument behind it. It's really helpful for trying to understand this complex space. So thanks very much. I wanted to ask you about how you think that these high growth technology innovation firms and leaders that like we have around here in San Francisco, how it relates to your framework. In particular, there's this argument that we run into a lot, and Chenwei and Minu just had this great seminar about responsible AI recently. We run into this argument that, you know, any kind of restrictions or regulations or accountability to stakeholders slows down the pace of technological innovation, which is bad for society as a whole. And so you should give us maximum breathing space and breathing room. I was wondering, you know, how you fit that vision of technological innovation in your framework, or how you interpret it.
Wow, that is a complex question. One could write a book around that, I guess. Yeah, it's quite interesting. I mean, it is really this tension between time and principles that are there. I mean, we know from other technological innovations that it is important to know about the consequences of innovations first. So think about the nuclear bomb, for instance. Think about asbestos. My position, and I can only talk from my position here, is that we need to consider the concerns raised by some of the founders of AI themselves. And so there is no easy answer. I mean, reality is happening. So the incredible speed and pace is there. Obviously, internationally, there is a need for certain rules and regulations. This can hinder, obviously, the innovative development that is there. But oftentimes, particularly if innovations they produce their own life, and that is, I think, happening with AI. The question is if AI is currently seen as supporting us, and in many ways it does. Think about the health industry, but it can also comes with this incredible danger that it can actually extinct humankind itself, which some of the founders raised. So I don't have an answer here. I can only say it would be good if the leaders in the tech industry would take an integrative approach here and really think about what are their different responsibilities and think about the consequences of their actions, not only in terms of business, but in terms of society, in terms of future generations. And I mean, we already see now an impact on changing workplaces. We see an impact on employees who are scared if they can keep their jobs. And I think these things need to be aligned. I mean, the question is really, do we need to have this speed? Or are we victims of our understanding that there is only competitiveness and speed that helps the survival of great companies? So, I mean, as human beings, we are the creator of reality. Now, business leaders have a lot of power and influence. So if they see what the future should look like and think from the future, then there are a lot of answers for the present and how to approach that.
Thanks so much. And if you need to continue this conversation, I'm sure there are some wineries around Adelaide we can all gather at.
Oh, fantastic. Please drop me an email.
Wonderful. Eldon, are you here? Do you want to unmute yourself and ask the question?
So I am actually wondering if the responsibility mindset that you refer to as the traditional isn't actually an irresponsible mindset. And, you know, we see some real problems coming out of a mindset that is focused on profit only and profit above all else. And, you know, I mean, I've just gone through several articles on Boeing, and really, it's a hollowing out of a company, offloading and outsourcing and all kinds of things, and a company that you know spent far more money on buying back their shares to increase share price rather than doing R&D or, you know, whatever. So I want to call it irresponsible mindset, not a responsible mindset. Anyway, any comments on that?
Sure. I think this is a quite interesting point. And I think how the traditional economist started, it is, I think, not that this mindset was supposed to do harm. I think the intention was to contribute to the larger number of, or to the welfare of the larger number of people through this, let's say, a more neoliberal approach. But as you said, there are quite a number of risks associated with it. And I said this, if under certain conditions, namely, if it is adhering to the norms and standards of society, if taxes are paid, if no crime is committed, if under those ifs, it can be within the responsible leadership landscape. Perhaps just thinking about your comment, perhaps the box needs to be smaller here, that it is not equally large as the other ones. So I think there are, I think, really thinkers or traditional economists that have contributed substantially to positive developments within society by creating their businesses and by making profit and also paying taxes. I mean, it's a contribution to society, and not, I mean, investing or evading it to other countries where they don't have to pay taxes, right? So I think in a limited way, I personally define it as a responsible approach, but there is certainly a lot of research needed and you brought this example of Boeing, what are the boundaries here where organization or leaders already shift outside of this framework? And I think it's quite an important discussion, because I recently had a conversation with a colleague who actually asked me if a leader, the CEO of a tobacco company, could sit in this framework. And my first reaction was, no, I think there are certain industries that I would not necessarily say represent this framework, right? Like, yeah. But it's always a discussion there. What if the tobacco company now, if the CEO decides to use tobacco for medical reasons, right? So a shift in their own business model, in their purpose. So then all of a sudden, we see a movement there. And perhaps this is also something that the framework as such, and now I'm deviating a little bit from your original question, but the framework is not as static as it may seem, because we see that leaders are moving, leaders are developing themselves. So there can be perhaps a leader outside that was sitting perhaps rather outside of this responsible leadership landscape. So think about Ray Anderson, who had a truly hugely polluting business. And he said in one of his speeches today, I would be put in prison for doing that. But then he had this epiphany, and he turned around this toxic business into one of the first one to become zero emission company, and set an example in these industries for others to follow. So I think one really needs to look then into the individual case. But I appreciate your concerns there, and this sharpens the discussion. So there is more research needed here. Under what conditions does the largely criticized traditional economist has a justification to sit in this landscape?
Right. If I can just add to this, I think, a lot of neoliberals will quote Adam Smith. But when you think of Adam Smith's, conversation, if you will, it happened in a very different time with a societal context that was, I would say, far more congruent or coherent across the board, highly infused with, okay, you can say Victorian England, morals and so on. But anyway, a moral framework on which you then built, if you will, some level of self-interest. So yes, I'm interested in making shoes, and so I'll make shoes, but I'm going to make shoes within a context that is actually an ethical context. And if I don't, then I will certainly not be in business, or I'll be thrown in jail, or whatever the case is. But as that erodes, now we're in a real predicament, where the earlier question of what happens when profit and ethics bump into each other. And my question in that context is since when has it been okay to do business unethically? Do business ethically and make a profit, of course. But anyway, so I'll stop there. It's a soapbox for me, and I'll just quit. But thank you very much for this presentation and for your answer. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I also like JP's comments. Yeah, that quadrant is called traditionalist economics, because there's a newer model of irresponsibility where even that minimal level following laws, paying tax, and job creation are not the goals. Yeah, Minu.
Thank you, Nicola, for wonderful presentation. So I have several questions, but we don't have time. But I'm just going to focus on maybe one. Lack of time here. So first is a clarification question on the quadrant here. So you have on the left-hand side what is it? It's called the degree of accountability towards others. So so this is at the individual level, right? Am I right about this? Right, so the individual level. So do you see any sort of parallels of this type of framework, perhaps at the leadership, like the CEO C-suite level? Because the interest of a CTO versus a CFO versus a CEO might be clashing quite a bit. So so do you see any sort of like more group level framework? Have you seen anything like that before? Maybe even like a C-suite level framework for this kind of quadrant-based approach?
That's interesting. But first, let me ask a clarification question. When you say CPO, you mean Chief Purpose Officer?
Chief Technology CTO is
Ah,
what I meant.
CTO.
Yeah, CTO versus CFO, all the C-suite people, right?
Also here, not seen yet. It's in the making. What we see, it's quite interesting, particularly at the board level. There is quite diversity of thinking there. I think there are quite a number of opposing views that need to be reconciled as well. If you think about the CTO, but then also the Chief Purpose Officer, not many of them are sitting on the board yet, but I think it's coming. We also see Chief Human Resource Officers. They may have quite different understandings. So CFO and CTO in contrast to chiefs of HR or other domains. So I think there is probably quite substantial discussion there. If an organization wants to develop itself, obviously it needs to know about, what are the different mindsets there, which of the members of the board can help us to best achieve our purpose. So if there is a shift in organizational purpose, obviously this needs to be reflected in the composition of the board as well, to then operationalize such a framework can help in terms of selection of board members, selection of CEO, etc.
This is why I wanted to kind of some more clarification on your idealist thing here. So you mentioned when you were discussing the idealist that this person is more focused on others, especially marginalized people. Is that right? Am I getting that right?
Yeah, and social issues and in general could be also environmental issues, etc.
But since this is at the individual level, shouldn't that be more on myself versus others, meaning others in my team, or why is it marginalized people specifically?
That's simply what our research most showed, that CEOs in that area, and we had other examples, look into really helping underprivileged stakeholders or those stakeholders that are marginalized. You may also think, for instance, about Mohamed Yunus and Grameen Bank. So when he set it up, his mission was to actually bring finance to those that would never have access to a loan, and so to have new solution approaches towards that. So nobody, when he started, actually supported him. So his mentors said, "Oh, you are crazy, don't do that. I mean, you will never succeed in that." But he saw that. I mean, he was a professor of economics himself, and he had this vision and he had this drive to create something new, this entrepreneurial spirit that then helped him to be quite successful in that, to the extent that nowadays even large banks actually have microfinance loans in their portfolio, right? I'm not sure if that answers your question.
No, thank you. No, I was just wondering if, I don't want, I mean, we're all used to like 2x2 matrices, right? So I'm just thinking maybe there's another dimension that's not being captured, maybe it's stakeholder variety, stakeholder, like how much there's a clash between stakeholders, that type of thing that's not being captured here. I'm just thinking in those lines. One other thing that I want to quickly, I know we're running out of time. There's this often clash, but do you think integrative leadership is ever possible in a firm that's driven by Wall Street, expectations?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is possible. If you look at, as I would not necessarily only say Wall Street, but perhaps by when they are publicly listed. I mean, it's more difficult, but I mean, let's put it that way. It's always a big change process that is happening. For instance, Unilever, I think Paul Pullman has started this kind of change. If you now look into Unilever ANZ, so Australia and New Zealand, the CEO, Nikki Sparshot, had achieved B Corp status for Unilever and is pretty much, I think, trying to bring and to balance these different objectives with a positive social impact in mind. So there are examples. There are few examples because I mean it's obviously always it's new, it's innovative. Who has the spirit to go onto this mission, right? And so, but there are examples, and if you look into B Corps, you cannot necessarily say that all B Corps are integrators, right? So one has to do an additional study to differentiate between instrumentalists and integrators in that space. But I think there is a development going on here that should be closely observed. It's not I mean, someone said earlier, I mean, most people or most multinationals and leaders of multinationals probably sit in the traditional economist or instrumentalist space, and I agree with that. But we see this movement and aspirations to get into that space.
So there's this book, and I posted a link for the book, but the author of that book, Hemant Taneja, he wrote a book in 2017. It's called Unscaled, and he argues that there's a fundamental tension between scale and purpose. So there's a tension that not everything that you have to create impact needs to be at a very high scale. You could have impact at a very small scale and still be profitable, so I don't know how you see that. Is there a tension between scale and impact? How do you see that? Is there, what do you think?
I mean, probably some sort of tension that is there. You see that in the idealist quadrant. So social entrepreneurs try to scale to have a broader impact. But I mean, it depends on the context. It depends on the industry. On the product. To answer this question, I think you probably can have an impact. Let's say with a pharmaceutical product that is needed for a smaller group of patients and don't need to have the scale. But then obviously the question is what's the price of the product? So there's always, I mean, you can have economies of scale to bring obviously a product to a lower price to the market. So ideally you have more scale to have a higher impact.
Well, that's the traditional viewpoint, right? So that you have to have scale equals impact, right? But the point that he was making in that book is you can have more smaller, more focused product, like you just mentioned, maybe a bespoke product or more, I guess, specified, customized service, customized pharmaceutical for a particular audience that can then create more impact at an individual level. So while we might think traditionally that a large scale is needed for access to capital, access to investors and such, so that's the tension he was exploring. It's just a point that I thought was interesting that he made.
It
and he wanted
is.
to see what you think.
And I think it would be great if you could share the name of the author as well, because I think, Mino, I think it's not an either or. We probably need both, depending on the particular problem that we try to solve. And so I think, therefore, I think we also need all of these different approaches. And this is also, someone also mentioned that for earlier, depending on the context where one is in. So there are quite economies or countries where you have still a dominance of the traditional economists. So you need to try to find ways to actually foster the responsible side of that. So then you have other economies where you perhaps already are pretty much in favor of this opportunity seeker approach and can leverage it there. But then there is the other areas where you can actually support the integrator and the idealist. So it is very much dependent on different factors, industry, country, then also, I think the aspirations, obviously, of the leader who is driving that, access to a motivated workforce. And what we currently see is that Generation Z, younger generations are very much looking into that they can actually make a positive contribution. There is a lot of talk around values and social purpose. So we also need to consider this time dimension, so this intergenerational side as well. So it's a very complex topic here. While it is a simple framework, there are a lot of things that one can do with it, make it more dynamic, expand it, derive research questions. So yeah, so that's the idea around it, to inspire research.
Thank you, Nicole. Thank you for the inspiring talk.
Thank you so much. I will stop recording now. And the talk will be uploaded to our IE YouTube channel, so all you can check it out later. And I would like to thank all for being part of our events today. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me and for the great conversation. I very much appreciate the discussion and the new points that were really raised here, and would like to continue. So whenever you like to drop me an email, please do so at nicola.pless@unisa.edu.au.
Awesome. We'll be in touch. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you. Bye-bye.